Well, welcome to Just Me podcast, another podcast from obviously the wonderful world of me. And today we're joined by the amazing Dr. Lawrence, who is just amazing. Can I call you Loz?
Yeah, you could. That's a Brummie. The funny thing is, I'm from Birmingham originally. I've got a
Right,
lot of my family are in Birmingham, and they abbreviate Lawrence to Loz.
right.
So. Where are you? Where are you?
Well, I live now up in North Wales, but I was born in Portsmouth. I went to college in Birmingham. I've moved around everywhere. Lived in
Okay.
New York, Amsterdam, and whatever. So yeah, I'm a gypsy by emotional trade, I think. So tell us. So okay, we know who you are,
Yeah.
Loz. But what is it that you do? Take us right back to childhood and up to today.
Oh, wow. I'll try and be as brief as I can.
All right, mate.
So, childhood, I was born in Birmingham. My mother then moved from Birmingham with me, and my younger brother. It was I suppose it was fleeing from domestic violence. It was clear. It was a clear
Wow.
section. So she fled from domestic violence from an unhappy relationship there, came to Bristol for a little bit. She went to settle in Bristol. When she came here as a European, I suppose, as a white woman, and she had two dual heritage children, she was advised that she'd be able to have a better start if she actually got rid of her children, because they'd make her life difficult as a single woman with two dual heritage children. And my younger brother then was adopted to another family. I was sent to live with, fortunate for me, it was informed that I was too attached to my mum and my family because I was older, he was younger. And my grandparents took me on, and I went and lived in a little village outside of Weston-super-Mare called Uphill. And I went and lived with my grandparents for a couple of years while my mum settled in Bristol. And then I came back to my mum at about the age of 5.5.
Wow.
We sat there, went to primary school, Bannerman Road, enjoyed primary school. And did primary school, did the 11 plus, which used to be an exam that we had back then. And in the 11 plus, I did really well. And I was due to get a free scholarship to a leading, like grammar school in Bristol. And I went and viewed the school. I was going to be a boarder at the school. Went around, looked at the school, saw my little space. I was going to board my bed, and that was good because I suppose it kind of goes with type. My mum had ended up going from one relationship for domestic problems and violence, and ended up straight back into another one. So to be removed from that relationship and to go into boarding school, for me, it looked like a way out and a better place to be. Then for some reason that I'll never know, the scholarship was revoked after we'd gone and visited the school. So I'd gone there with my stepfather, my mum, went to look at the school, been showed around, said you'll be starting in September. And then all of a sudden, because it was meant to be I'd meant to have achieved a free scholarship for the year. And then also it was said that you'd have to pay for this space. So that kind of had a real detrimental effect on my outlook and also on my behaviour. Because I'd done additional schooling at school to get into the next school. So when I came out of there, I was like, well, even if I'm doing right, I'm treated wrong. So I'm not going to try. And within 3 months of that, I know that my behaviour, I was a runaway, all different things. Within 3 months of that, I was then put into a children's home. And then I went to a children's home in Bristol. I was in children in care. Then I'd been in a couple of times before, but I was in care then for the next few years. And what was really detrimental in one sense then was when I first went into the children's home, I went from being a child that was excelling at school and work to all of a sudden being set work for a 5-year-old again, like being given the very first. Do you remember Peter and Jane reading books?
Yeah.
Being given the very first ones that would have a picture literally of like an apple on one page or something like that, and maybe 2 words on the next page. And all of a sudden, that was the work I was being set to. So that has a real degenerative impact on your education and what your attainment should be. But fortunately, I had an amazing headmaster from my primary school, Mr. Wadden. And even though I was now outside of his, I suppose, not just outside of his control, I was outside of his responsibility, which is the main thing. He actually came and looked for me, and he
Oh,
came to the assessment centre place I was being held at first of all, and he had me removed from the general class and placed into into a room. It's kind of like it's like a cupboard, to be fair. But that became my classroom while I was there, and he came and bought me work because he said to them, "You are
wow.
not going to destroy this child like this child did." Like,
Wow.
and you know, and I don't. Funny thing is, I go back. Remember, because I used to get in trouble in school because you find this, I like to talk. My best friend at the time, Derek Scales, had moved, but we used to meet in assembly in the morning. And I'd always talk to him in assembly. So we'd always get thrown out of assembly. So we'd get the cane every single morning
Oh,
for
my life.
talking assembly. But Mr. Wadham at one stage, because he knew about the domestic issues in my home life, I think he kind of looked over me. And one day when he was telling me off, he actually had a heart attack in front of me in his office. And yeah, but it's the same gentleman that then came to the assessment centre to ensure that my education as best he could stayed on track. So I was there for a
Wow.
few years. I was there for a few months. I went from there into a children's home, into I suppose a white working class neighbourhood, and I'd come
Right.
from living in Easton, which was a very multicultural community in Bristol. To suddenly one where when I went to the school, the only two children in the school of African diaspora heritage or African heritage of colour was me and another girl from my children's home in a school of
Wow.
approximately 12 to 1400 pupils.
Wow.
We were the only
Wow.
ones. Um, I want to lie, I tried everything I could to get removed from that school. And what was
Wow.
amusing, the head used to tell me, and my head of year used to go to me, Lawrence, we understand the problems that you've had in your life and what's around you. And don't worry, whatever happens, whatever you do, we understand. We will not remove you from the school. And I always tried
Wow.
everything I could to get removed from this school. So, I got to give them their credit that they really wanted to ensure I stayed in education. Then I came back to my community a bit later. So that was my third secondary school. I came back, I went to another school, I was there for a few months. Got removed from that school, then went to another secondary school, I was there for a couple of years. Then that's the school I was at the longest. Was going to leave there to go and do like a management training course. And then that fell through. And then I was going to go back to school to do my exams. They told me that I hadn't been submitted for my exams. So I never sat any exams. But then when the exam results came through, someone told me that my name was back then they used to put your name up on a board in like the hall, and everybody's results would be there for everybody to see. And my name was on the board with like failed to attend, didn't attend. So I was actually submitted for them, but the school had told me I hadn't been. So it actually came that I didn't attend my exams. Went did another sixth form, did that for a short period of time. So that was all my education. So I left education with no qualifications. Went
Wow.
into did like I think I did a YTS and some things like that, and a community program kind of jobs when I come out. It was hard to get into college without any qualifications. You don't sit well in the employment role. Lying when you haven't got any qualifications either. And then I got a job doing cavity wall loft installation, which was really good. I enjoyed doing that work for a company.
Hmm.
And then I got cancer when I was like about 20 years old. I had a lump appear in the side of my throat, which to be perfectly honest, I wasn't concerned with. It didn't hurt. It didn't cause me any discomfort. But I saw my mother one day, and she looked at it, asked me what the lump was, and I said, "Well, I don't know." She told me to go to a doctor. I went to a doctor. The doctor came back. There wasn't nothing. A year later, I saw my mum again. We didn't see it much of a lot, and I still had the lump. And then she got me to go to her doctor, with, and which quite quickly, I was then sent to the hospital to have a check. I had a check done. It was diagnosed as Hodgkin's non-lymphoma, Hodgkin's non-lymphoma, cancer in my neck. Went in, had that treated, had radiotherapy, And I think at that point in my life, I kind of felt like I'd been just continued being dealt a bad deck of cards.
Wow.
And I was a little bit like, yeah, it was like, well, maybe you're going to die anyway. You got cancer, you don't really know. I remember what I said to the doctor when I saw the specialist. I did just ask one question in the meeting. I was just like, can you fix it? And he said, yes. And I went, okay.
Yeah.
Then. That was the end of my consultation. I then left.
Wow.
I just literally walked out. I was like, okay, that's it. But I think what it was, when I had the radiotherapy done, what it did, it made my neck go as black as my t-shirt.
Wow.
It was all down this one side here, just excessively black. And like, I suppose like the most extreme form of sunburn. It was like that, and the skin went really crisp and it would peel. And I think I gave up on all conventional means of living. And, you know, I was a mischievous kid. I'd been a runaway from a young child. I was always quite fascinated by the streets. And I made the streets and that my life over really for most of my 20s. Hustling and just living that life. And raving. I think I never really danced or anything like that, or done engage in that type of social activities. And I think with this prospect, because I had to have checkups for the first of all, it was 3 months, then 6 months, then yearly. There was always this kind of grim reaper hanging in the background, thinking, well, you might come back and you might just die. So go out there and live in any possible way you can. And I didn't like being told what to do. That just seemed like the way that I could live and exert myself. And that's what I did. And I think a bit of a problem. Most things I've ever done, I've always kind of done all right at it, because I've always jumped into whatever I've done with both feet. So that was pretty much my 20s, was that and raving and hustling and up and down, quite a lot of chaos as well, but also some fun. And I was like, no, I want to just say that it was all like, doom and gloom. It wasn't.
Yeah.
I lived like that, and then I was going to become a parent for the first time, and that absolutely terrified me. I think it's the most frightening. That was for my whole life. Nothing frightened me like that. Frightened me. I didn't really have an understanding of what, let's just say, a conventional family was, and a responsibility. I hadn't enjoyed really growing up, and so I had a lot of dark memories and emotions to do with childhood myself. Didn't really see it as a great experience. And then for all my days, I was that responsible for me. Let alone to think now you're going to have to be responsible for another. And it was, and yet, to be perfectly honest, that absolutely freaked me out. I didn't feel prepared, adequate in any way to take on this responsibility. But it also made me think you need to change your life. And I think from that, I ended up going and doing a course. I think it was like CLATE initially. I thought IT, I'd always had an attitude back when I was at school for using a computer. So I thought, right, what can you do? What could you do? Like, how are you going to provide how are you going to get a profession in your life? How are you going to be somebody responsible? Like, so I think computers, I think we're talking late 90s. So I was thinking about computers. That's the thing. I think let's go in that route. And I ended up going and doing a CLATE course very first of all, which I think is computer literacy and information technology. Like at the very basic form that they teach you at the beginning how to turn a computer on. That's where you start. And I went and did a course when I was like 29, 30 years old at the time. And I was on a course with children that had underperformed at school. So I was in a room with 16-year-olds that were all wayward. And I used to be that type of child. And what was quite funny, all of a sudden I'm in there thinking, my God, I've messed so much up. I've missed so much time. This is really important for me now to learn. And then I've got these young children there. They've got a whole future ahead of them. This isn't important. We're only here because we've been sent to do this course. So I can remember I tried to look, I need to be here, and trying to tell the children what to do there. So that was quite amusing. was that dynamic of what had actually suddenly occurred. So I was kind of looking back at my
Yeah.
past self, like, yeah. So I did that course. I ended up getting put on. I did that. I started doing NVQ level 1. Moved on to a level 2. I got a placement for YMCA training, which was the YMCA as we know it. But they had a training wing where they did education with young people and adults at this period in time. I got a placement there. I then ended up doing an NVQ level 3 on placement. Became an IT training advisor. Worked my way up to then
Wow.
being a program coordinator. Then I became an internal verifier for OCR, and then I worked up to become an NVQ assessor as well. And all of this happened within a 3-4 year time frame.
Wow.
From putting that energy in and thinking you've got to do something. So so that became that. And it was at that point when it was through that time scale, just at the end of there, I actually got burnt out after 4 years in there. I was working within the YMCA training in Bristol. It was in the inner city. It was by Easton, where I grew up. And then I was actually working with a lot of children that were very like me, full of energy, being let down through the education system, were often looked at as a threat because a lot of the people that were teaching them were from a different community or different culture.
Yeah.
And so I worked with a lot of the young people there because I saw myself in most of them. And what's lovely from that is I still have huge relationships with most of those young people today, because we connected. Because I was very fair, firm, and at the same time we had fun. But they know it's like, oh no, sometimes really firm, this, that, and that for us. But they couldn't. There was no. All I saw when I worked there were children.
Oh.
So sometimes they'd come with them, all their bluster and bravado, and I'd be giggling. I'd be like, look at this child playing that game because they've been allowed to push the boundaries so much in the other spaces. A lot of them been excluded from school. Lots of them have had teachers or adults who feared them. Now, I knew this through experience. I knew that the game of, if you're a child and adults fear you, the playing that game for a child, it's a very dangerous game, but it gives them lots of sense of power and strength, and a child will play against you there. And I've got to teach a fight. All the teach it's like the power dynamic is so wrong that the child plays it out, but the consequences to playing this game are so detrimental. So I had a few of them try that with me, and it was just like, really? It's like, no, come on, we don't. This doesn't happen. So, but I learned about this, my affinity with teaching and with a gap being that needed to be filled, and instead of looking at other people to fill it or complaining about other people not doing it, it's what can you do to make this better, rather. So that was that. And then the poetry came along. I think it's a bit like that. I started seeing my son was growing up now. For 2 children, I had 2 children now. And then one was at school. And then that later on, I've got one at nursery as well. And a lot of the things that I was kind of intrigued by and drew me into a life on the streets and was into mischief and into crime and into trouble. I saw that they were still present in my community, and now they are present around my children. So, so outside my and it's funny. It used to be a community in St. Paul's that for Bristol was it was the crime capital for the southwest of England. It was the drug and vice capital, St. Paul's in Bristol. For the southwest of England, street prostitution was permitted. Drug dealing on the streets was permitted. It was the one place. It's where it was actually contained. It's got a long history of this. And it was actually going through its early stages, now St. Paul's, of gentrification in the early 2000s. So a lot of the issues that were happening there was kind of being slightly policed more. And the movement started moving, and these acts started moving to the neighbouring community, which was Easton. Started moving across to that. And it so happened that my youngest was at nursery in St. Paul's. My older son was at primary school in Easton. Now, the prostitution and drug dealing that was around my son's nursery in St. Paul's was now moving to outside my son's school gates in Easton.
Wow. Wow.
And I'm watching these things, and I've been like this, like feral child that I was, because my home life was so unsettled. I spent more time on the streets, running around. I was like, these things can't influence my children like they influenced me.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, what's going on? And at first, I started going to like council and trying to raise it, even with the school. What are you doing to address it? And there's an energy that like, well, this is just how it is here.
Mm.
So in the beginning, I didn't. The funny thing is, when I started on this journey, I didn't actually know what I was trying to achieve. So I started to go out and just film and photograph everything that was going on in my community and do little
Wow.
logs. And then one day I got caught up in a situation with a drug dealer in St. Paul's, and who my partner had picked up my youngest from nursery, had walked past what was at that time the black and white calf, and that was the front line there. And we'd had a huge influx of people from Jamaica coming to the community to hustle to sell drugs, class A drugs, crack and heroin. And the funny thing is, people don't get, it's like the reason they travelled all the way from Jamaica to Bristol to do that there is because they knew they could. So this is something that people have to understand. But the only reason they came is because they knew that you could go there and stand on the street and sell these drugs, and the people would come to you. So what's quite funny, a part of this dynamic is this. A lot of people, where they have a stereotype view maybe of people of African diaspora, heritage or culture, that, they're criminals, they're drug dealers. But a lot of these Jamaican that came to Bristol for this specific reason, the only English people they saw were drug users. So their impression of white English people was that all white English people were drug addicts, because they're the only ones they interacted with. So that's a bit like when you see there's lots of communities or cultures that they only see, in a sense, black culture or African diaspora culture through the telly, but never engage with the communities. Yeah. So if you look on the telly, they're all criminals, they're all thugs, they're all this, because that's the only lens you see us through. Well, the ones that come all the way from Jamaica to here to sell in this place, the only lens that they actually physically in the real world met English people were drug addicts, and they believed all English people were drug addicts. So it kind of learned our narratives can be spun as well. So it's all educational in different ways. So what happened then is somebody, actually, my partner, I went to pick her up. She'd been slightly assaulted because someone had come over, tried to grab hold of her to talk to her. So when I seen her with my son in the buggy, I could see that something wasn't right. And I said, oh, what's happened? And she goes, oh, no, everything's okay, everything's okay. And even her response told me something had happened. So I pressed her on that, like, no, really, what's happened? I need to. So she explained to me somebody, like, they come across, I was ignoring him, and then he come over and grabbed hold of me for me to speak to him. I said, what, he's grabbed you and you're pushing the buggy coming from nursery? She said, yeah. She said, yeah. I said, well, we need to go and deal with this, don't we? So we got I put them in the car. We drove straight back down onto the front line. Him and all the people all outside the calf. But remember, I've grown up here. I've lived in and out of calf, and these are all the footsteps I've walked in all my life in the space. So I've ended up getting out of the car, got into an altercation with this individual. You remember, I ended up picking them up physically by their throat and slamming them into the car, and telling them and everybody else there that in this car is my family, and if anybody touches my family, do this ever again, this is gonna escalate very quickly. Not in such polite language as I just used. We had this incident. I went away, and over the next few weeks or months, I would then go and pick my son up from nursery, and I'd come back, and we used to go in the cafe and have some food, and I'd sit in there and be very confrontational. The thing, but at the same time, it's like, you don't trouble my thing. But then while this is going on, I'm watching. I get to reflect on some of it. But what happened is on that day, later on, there was a similar incident that happened with somebody else. and it went to escalate. I've gone home. When I've gone home, to get something to go back to escalate the situation, I've walked into the house, I've walked into my home, and I've been like, and I don't know what it was at this moment as I walked in. And I picked up a pen and piece of paper. And I've just wrote my feelings, but in a poem. And I've never written a poem in my life since. I
Wow.
think at this time now, I think it was 25. If you ever get the year correct, but it was 23. I'm pretty sure it's 2003. 24, 23, but I'm pretty sure it's 2003. And I've come and I've wrote a poem and I've ended up calling it Life. And I've just written this situation, what's going on. And I can't remember the poem. I'm trying to give it to you really quickly and really shortly, but I can't remember it off my head. But it's something like, to all the people shopping at the mall, going to purchase something big or small, do you really know about our life, living where drugs and vice are rife? Well, let me open your eyes to life we live. But don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to give. Just listen. As I walk the streets with my eyes wide open, these are the things I see that need to be spoken. Smackheads, crackheads and hoes loitering on the street. Perverts, punters and police circling the beat. Out of this pain, round and round the lines are continually spinning. Can you tell me out of this game who is winning? If you listen to the news, it sounds all so plain. It's the yardies that bring the drugs overseas by plane. But have you ever thought they'd bring this disease? Maybe it's the authorities that have brought our communities to its knees. But could you imagine if we all had the same opportunity in life? We might all end up happily married with 3 children and a wife. But these are the things that surround our children every day when they go to the shops, schools, right, to play. They have to traverse something surrounded by evil. How can people say that we are treated all the same, equal? That's pretty much what it was. I'm trying to remember that. That's something I wrote like
so powerful.
18 years ago now, 19 years ago. I sat down, I just wrote that. And what I didn't do was leave the house and go back to something that would have ended. It could have ended up costing me my life. In 2 ways, it would have. It was like my life actually completely physically, or me being incarcerated for a very long period of time.
Wow.
And it was at that point, after writing this poem, it was like, yeah, you've become part of the problem now because you're caught up in alterations and violence and this around it. So, but who is responsible? And that's when I started to really analyse that. How is it possible that you're here? How have you come from Jamaica to come here and be here? And you're able to be there, like 60 people, literally 60 people to 100 people, all stood together in one place in the heart of a community, being able to sell drugs on the street. How was it before that we had prostitution on 12 prominent corners, 2 to 3 prostitutes on every corner for decades, but able to be there? You know, so what used to come from the community a lot, and what people used to say is, the question you used to ask a lot is why this wouldn't happen there. So St. Paul's was quite close to some really affluent communities as well. They were only like a community away, within a mile and a half. And we'd often say, why hasn't that happened there? Why doesn't it happen there? All of a sudden the question changed to, but how has it been allowed to happen here? Rather than saying it wouldn't happen there. It was, but why here? So you can see that it's a community that's settled by immigrants from the Caribbean predominantly before, and Irish immigrants as well. And then so it was a new community of people that, in a sense, felt they couldn't complain about the situation they're in because maybe a lot felt that they should be thankful for being here. And you haven't really got the right to complain. But on the other side, but when they did complain, they weren't listened to. And that's the next part of the journey, which I found. So now we're starting to bring it to attention, raise these issues, and nobody wants to listen. The authorities don't want to listen. The police, which would profile the children in the community and profile the people in the community, but it will not remove the crime or the issues that are in the community. That so many are coming from people that, like, people would come from not just as far afield as Jamaica, but the whole of the country to this community because you could come there and these crimes, like I keep saying it, were permitted here. But and then as this was going on, ASBOs came in, antisocial behaviour orders, which you would have thought were directly created to remove communities from people coming into them committing crime. They wouldn't be submitted. So through this process, I started writing poetry to record and to draw attention to what was going on there, and try to get people to listen to it from outside of like the community and outside of Bristol. And at this point now, I think that there's a chance to shame the authorities or to shame the police and everybody into doing what they should do. Because all of these crimes are directly around children. Like directly outside the school, I haven't got the book on me, it's not here, but it said that the police actually put a sign up right outside the school gate that said, police warning, curb crawlers will be arrested. And directly on the other side of the road behind that sign it was Mill Pond Primary School sign. So the prostitution, that's where it is. So anybody would have thought, you don't put a sign there that is then educating the children that are learning to read, it's a primary school, to what's outside their school. You would just remove that. There's a place it shouldn't be. It's directly outside a primary school. So what we had that going on, and also it came to light that I then moved into St. Paul's. I had a flat in St. Paul's. Directly opposite my flat was a hostel. And it then come to light that in the hostel, we had some of the most high-risk paedophiles in the UK were being held in this hostel. The back wall of the hostel was the back wall to our local community centre and nursery. Some of the people in the hostel that were housed there, the paedophiles, I think it's Rodney Cook, something Cook his name was. Well, he's literally like all in the news stage. But they were on something called a sex offenders prevention order, which is like an ASBO for sex offenders. So that was that on their order, it would say that they couldn't be residing or sleeping or staying in proximity to schools or with vulnerable children, this, that, and the other. But they were being housed there anyway. Ended up running a campaign from there at the same time as doing the poetry writing stuff. With that, it then came that John Reid, who was the Home Secretary back then, in 2006 into 2007, that's where we are now. He had actually identified 12 hostels similar in the country at the point of detention. And he said that all hostels within these bounds to place the children must be closed. Every hostel in England was shut. Well, declassified. They weren't closed, they were declassified, so they could no longer house these high-risk offenders. The only one in the country that wasn't reclassified was the one in St. Paul's, Bristol.
Wow.
It's the only one that stayed open. So we tried to get hold of John Reid for a while. I did a petition, we did marches, but everyone was silent, because I even had the police come to my house and say, Lawrence, if anything happens to anybody in the hostel, anything happens to the hostel, you will be held accountable. And you can be done for incitement to riot, you can be done for causing a fray, you can be done for what he said, but what about the individual in the hostel? And then I think it was 2007, it was earlier than that. We actually had an individual from the hostel. This was a sex offender, this was a criminal. I think his name was David St. Charles. And he killed a taxi driver called Colin Winston. And he was from it's so crazy, but he was from the hostel in Brigstock Road in Smithfield St. Paul's. And then he killed a taxi driver next to Mill Pond Primary School in Easton, which was my son's primary school. And what used to happen, the thing with this whole thing of demonising the community of St. Paul's, was when crimes were committed from people from that hostel, it was never reported that they were from the hostel. It was like there was some relationship between the press and the authorities to keep the hostel's presence to a minimum. But it always says, so-and-so from St. Paul's committed this crime in the paper. So-and-so from St. Paul's did this crime. But they were actually from the Pale hostel. And that's happened with this David St. Charles. So that had occurred there. So it escalated to the point where someone that was housed in this hostel that was of high risk in the heart of a community by children had actually committed murder. sex offenders in there had assaulted children from the community as well. So all of this I'd managed to collate, had public meetings. And then fortunately, after about a year or so, managed to ambush John Reed at a meeting in another part of the city. A huge set of petitions, 4,000 things. And what we did was filmed it, got into the meeting, had a cameraman with me, friend. So we filmed this. And not long after, I am pretty sure that the person that came from government to come to see me later, a few months later, for some reason I always thought it was Andy Burnham. I'm not sure, but I think it was Andy. He came. And he'd been to the hospital, see the hospital. He came to me at the community centre, where I was artist in residence at the time. And the funny thing is, the first thing he said when he turned up was, I've been in the hospital, Lawrence, and what we've agreed to do, what we're going to do first of all, is we are going to frost the windows at the back, so they're frosted over so you won't be able to see out. And my immediate response, which I think was a bit too quick for him, was, will they open?
Wow.
And he just went, he kind of held himself around. He just went, okay, Lawrence, what do you want to happen? And I said, it needs to be reclassified. They need to be removed. I said, all the others have been. This one hasn't. How can this still be ongoing? And within a few weeks, it got reclassified. And it was no longer a high-risk hostel. They were then removed from the hostel. And I think through that way, what it showed, what I learned, and one of the things, because I had two battles to fight at that time, was fight the prostitution or the drugs outside the primary school, or fight the paedophiles in the hostel next to the nursery. And when I looked at them both, weighed them up, I was like, the worst of the two evils is the paedophiles in the hostel. So that's the one I'm going to put all the energy into and the most. And even with the people outside the school, the drug addicts, the prostitutes, the hustlers, the dealer, everybody, coming through the care system. Some of the people I grew up with, people I've grown up with, they're the people out there, prostitutes, drug addicts, all of that. I know that. So even when I filmed them and did stuff with them, I used to hide their faces. When I put out the film, a documentary I made about it, I did the poetry collection about it, I hid all their faces because, to me, they're victims as well. With the hostel thing, I had a different view on that. But what it showed and what I learned, what I wanted to prove is that we have laws that exist that should be protecting all of us. But in certain places, the laws are not being upheld.
Wow.
And people aren't being held account, but we didn't need new laws. They were there. Because these laws were protecting all the other communities in Bristol. But for some reason, in our community, they weren't being used. So it's how do you make people accountable for and get the laws to be action, to get the law to be upheld. And that proved it was like, there you go. No new laws needed. Let's just make the people accountable. So what ended up with, in the final part of our conversation, was that I mentioned the sex offenders prevention orders to who the government official was at the time. And I said, so they're not meant to be here. So that's the probation service and the police and the council are all complicit in them being here. So that's negligence. That negligence has resulted in criminal acts being committed here. So that makes that negligence criminal negligence. So you are criminally negligent in housing these people in this community, in our community. And that's when the response was really like, right, it was finding them criminally negligent, which they were doing, but felt that it was okay. And that was where the law went. And that's what I got addressed. So that was and the poetry was all coming through that, and it was working. Funny things, back then there was no YouTube when I started doing this. There was no Facebook. There was just something, if people remember, MySpace. So I used to log all of this stuff on MySpace, put the poems on MySpace, shoot the short videos, put it all on MySpace. And so MySpace was this log, but it could be viewed from anywhere in the world. And it was taking the power out of the local authorities' hands that were doing very well at stifling information or not giving a voice to it. So that was where, social media has been instrumental in the work I've done. and we've kind of both grown. We've kind of both grown and developed together on
Wow.
through this journey, and it's been a great tool. It could do a lot of harm, but it could do a lot of good. So that was that. We came through there. I think I was doing some other work, doing the poetry, and then I think 2010, then 2010, my cousin committed suicide. He jumped off Clifton Suspension Bridge.
Oh, crumbs.
A few months later, my brother died from a drug overdose.
Oh.
My younger brother, who I'd got to know after he came to look for the family after he turned 18. I got to know him a bit, but he had a lot of issues due to being adopted and what had gone on in his life. So he died of a drug overdose in Bath a few months after my cousin had committed suicide. Wow. And then my father died 6 weeks after that. So that was in 2010. And then, so I'd done an exhibition, a collection of work called Whose Story back in 2007 after the City Tales collection, which was all about the prostitution and the drugs in our community. I then did an exhibition in 2011 and published that book in 2011. And then I quit poetry. I actually, wow. I've had a lot of personal stuff going on, other stuff going on around. And I actually stopped doing the poetry. That ended. I said, right. And I got on with other things in my life. And I think it was 2015. I then came back to work for Kids Company. Because later on I bought some properties. So I just managed my properties that I bought, which I'd done. So I concentrated on that. And then I came back to work for Kids Company as a creative writer in 2015. Kids Company had come to Bristol, set up in Bristol from London, the thing here, and they created something called an Urban Academy. And also I said, I want to get back into, how can I help? I'm doing stuff directly for myself. There's a need still. I went under Philly, I think just to try and help children like me. I looked there, seen that, and I went, right, I'm going to go in there. I can use my poetry. I could do that creative writing. I had the fallback of working for the YMCA training and that qualifications, that work there. Started working at Kids Company doing creative writing, working with young people there. Was doing that. Then Kids Company went through some problems around its fundraising. There's a big thing in the news around that. And then I ended up working for something called, I think it's called the Bath and North East Somerset Virtual School. Now, this is a school that worked with children that are outside of mainstream education. And I ended up doing one-to-one teaching with young people that were deemed too much of a risk to be with other children or to in an educational setting. And when I went to start doing that, it was meant to be 2-to-1. So you had two teachers or two staff work with one pupil. And on the first day, I went to do that, and I just said, I can't do that. I said, I'll do this work. I'm happy to do the work, but I've got to be one-to-one. I said, dynamic isn't it. The young person is always going to feel that we would have the ability to gang up on them. They're always going to feel that we're always going to collaborate with each other. We're going to always agree with each other. They're always going to feel. So they weren't happy, but in the end, they allowed that to happen. I got to work with a young man. I'd won. First of all, that lasted for a short period of time because he got removed, and then I had another young man, and we built up a good work relationship. I did that, and after about 7 months of doing that, and then he was getting ready to leave, and they got another one. I looked at what I was doing, and I was thinking, right, I could do this work now. I was being paid, and I was being paid very well for this work as well. It was like, but you're engaging with one person at a time, working one-to-one, and maybe if you get 2 people a year. That's who you have an impact on. And it was like, I think I can communicate with more people than this. I think there's another one. I think I can do more than this. And it was, I was doing 16 hours a week, getting £500 a week. They wanted to take it up to 32 hours. They'd have doubled my salary, and I got £500 a week, working one-to-one. With this, and it was like, and at the same time, I was like, I still don't think I've given poetry my all. I don't think I've really given it. I don't really know if I know where I know this to go. So it was
Yeah.
January 2016, I remember. I said that when my work with this young man I was working with came to an end and they're going to bring a new one in, I quit. And I decided to get back to poetry, and I put a small exhibition on in a place called CYN, Community Youth Network in Bristol, which was a community hub I'd been working out of. So I said, we're going to see what poetry can do. So I put a small exhibition of my previous work. Did that, became part of a creative collective. I started working towards that, but looking at solutions. Rather, everybody was still talking a lot about problems. It's like, no, it's about solutions. Like, the problems are here, and people keep talking about the problems. And people come into different environments, they come new to a thing, and it's the same old problems with new energy. Well, it's the same old problem. But what's the solutions? So, and that's when the journey, I think, for Cargo came about. I suppose one of the bits besides that, I suppose I'm going to digress and go back a little bit. Back in 2009, so before I stopped the work, there was the Colston Hall in Bristol, which Edward Colston became a lot more famous and known much later. But back in 2009, the Colston Hall was having a massive revamp, multi-million revamp. We put a big gold section on the old building. So me and who my partner is now in the company and co-founder of Cargo, Chaz Golding, we did a guerrilla art thing around that, like attack on the building in a sense. So we created a company and we called it RACE, which stood for Recognising Africa's Contribution to Europe. I did a poem. It was called Ship Shape and Bristol Fashion at the time. It's now called the Bristol Trade, but it's called Ship Shape and Bristol Fashion. And it highlighted Bristol's connection to the transatlantic slave trade and Edward Colston. I can give you the poem really quickly. I'll just go it, just so you can hear. So this was in 2009, so this is the poem. So the poem goes, Bristol built Colston's Hall a new extension clad in gold, which reminded me of all the African souls Bristol brought and sold. Now Edward Colston is held as the beacon for this trade, when the reality is, through it, Bristol was made. Bristol profited in many ways. To name them all would take us days. But trade, commerce and stature is to name just a few of how for the African people's suffering, Bristol grew. It was called the slave trade so that the people who profited could say their gains were easily made. But if we were able to talk to Milosevic, Pinochet or Hitler, they would say the same, even though we know their regimes are sinister. What Hitler did was rightly called a Holocaust. Shouldn't the same be said for Africa when you see all she lost? Through beatings, persecution, fear and death, people were enslaved to their last breath. People were taken from all over the great continent never to return. And over time, many would forget everything they did ever learn. Imagine not being allowed to educate your young. Imagine not being allowed to speak in your native tongue. How was it possible for people to absorb such pain? How could they witness such horrors and not go insane? Then over time, everything they learned, they'd forget. As they become part of the world. Then over time, they would forget. Then over time, everything they learned would be forgotten as they become part of a world where they belong at the bottom. How was it possible for people to absorb such pain? How is it possible for them to not go insane? You see, these are just a few of the things they had to endure so that the people who made it legal could gain more. The people who did it said they're the civilized race. They keep rewriting history to make their case. But if we look at the facts and the facts alone, who was uncivilized and savage is easily shown. So that's it. I tried to recall that just quickly off memory. So that was a poem that was written in 2009. We had flyers. We had actually Massive Attack, Bristol, well, famous Bristol group that we know. They'd always refused to actually play at the Colston Hall because of its name, unless its name was changed. I know them and I spoke with them, and they actually funded the production of posters and flyers to have this poem put on some information around Edward Colston, and a little brass plaque that we had made that we went and stuck on the side of the Colston Hall, which said along the lines that so we made out that the building had been made a memorial to the African people that had contributed to the development of Bristol. And that's kind of what was engraved on this plaque that we stuck to the Colston Hall. And on the flyers and the posters, we put the company we made up called Race, recognising African contribution, and its logo on there. We also put the head of Bristol City Culture Department, I can't remember his name now, but we put his name on there and his email address and Bristol City Council's thing. I made it all that this was officially done by the city to recognise Africa's contribution to Bristol. And that got into the media, it became a debate. But what this was a bit of mischief and a bit of fun without just being completely ripped apart by the painful memory the narrative's done. So, and this is what's carried forward then. It was like, we can play with this, we can be serious, but you can I suppose, an agent provocateur. You can do it with a bit of a glint in your eye. You shouldn't all because lots of certain these things, the pain that they gave me, all my poetry came from a painful place. Instead of doing something physical, I'd end up putting it into writing. And I can remember when I first see what they do to the Coast at all, it's like the mad whiff. Oh my God, they need to destroy that building, knock it down, burn it. You know, but I'm feeling really hurt when you've seen it. It's like, you can't keep being hurt. So what can you do to relieve this pain? And that's why solution-focused work is so important and became so important. What can you do? Being caught up in, So we travel all the way back now to 2016, but that's just to give some of the background of what we've got there. And then it was like, right, let's look at Bristol. So I keep looking at Bristol, so caught up in its slave trade history and the history of what the slavers have done and who's profited from that, who's done that. What great individuals are African and African diaspora heritage? What people have contributed from there? So I remember looking at revolutionaries first of all and seeing all the different people, all the revolutions that had been not written about, and the people that had done this, that had fought against oppressive forces and oppressive governments and oppressive regimes that would have been called terrorists or terrorists or criminals. But actually, just because the laws were in place didn't mean that the laws were just. You know, slavery was legal. Abhorrent, it wasn't just, but it was legal. So to fight against it, you were breaking the law. You would be deemed as a criminal. But like they say, one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. And that's what kind of sat with these stories. So it was to put together a story that kind of started with Bristol's involvement in the creation of what we know as the transatlantic slave trade. But from the beginning, have something to just give it a foundation, so that had been around like individuals like Colston, Bristol's merchants that involved. But from then, look at the people of African and African diaspora heritage, what they had contributed and achieved from that moment back in the 1400s. Coming forward to, because what we'd happened in Bristol now, we'd had, I think it was 2016, that Marvin Rees was elected as mayor. So originally it was being banded between the 1400s to 2016, but to look at an African narrative of achievement and accomplishment, to see what we had been responsible for ourselves, for Bristol electing, the city of Bristol electing the first mayor of African diaspora heritage in a city that was instrumental in the creation of the transatlantic slave trade. That was the narrative, and that's where cargo came from. So in the 1400s, 1500s, when enslaved Africans were first being put on ships, for the slave code that was developed and everything, they were classed not as human beings. They were classed as cargo and as property. And that was the reason why they could then be insured and thrown overboard if necessary, could be destroyed. So if you wanted to set an enslaved African on fire, throw him on the fire and burn him. It'd be the same as if you wanted to throw out an old wardrobe and burn it. It was legal because they weren't seen that they had been dehumanized. So cargo became the name for the project and the body of work. And Cargo stood
Wow.
and stands for Charting African Resilience, Generating Opportunities. So it was the journey there was to put the humanity back into the narrative, put the humanity back into the story. So we don't talk about slaves, we talk about the enslaved. And I think just these tiny little changes in language help to humanize the story. And that's what we did. I don't use colorisms, we don't use black and white in there, because the whole concept of race is 550 years old. It was constructed to allow humanity to enslave part of itself, but by othering people.
Wow.
By othering
Yeah,
people, people didn't feel like it was somebody else. It's not us, but we are one human family. That comes in many different variations of size and color and appearance. But Homo sapiens, human beings, it is one family that has ended up looking very, very different. And 550 years ago, it was deemed that there was a way that we could control bits of it and make some look inferior and create all these crazy stories. That the problem is, if you tell a lie long enough, a lie can become a reality.
Yeah.
And I'm not the first person to say that. That's been said over time. And so it was like, well, just because the lie is comfortable, we're going to continue in that comfortable space. So some of this stuff we have to address. And that became Cargo. So that was a poetry collection as well. So it was looking at a 500-year timeline of achievement and accomplishment of people of African diaspora heritage, rather than say, 400 years of slavery, look at all the suffering, look at all the pain. And then later on, African people from that savage, uncivilized continent were then humanized and then civilized and then Christianized and then given their freedom. Now, that's the narrative that had been said for so long, which was so disempowering for anybody of African diaspora heritage growing up in the West. I find that very demeaning, very uncomfortable. And it was like, let's address that. So that's why it started with revolutionaries that fought for their freedoms. Then after that, they forced abolition to happen. Like Haiti, the biggest revolution, one of the biggest revolutions ever in modern history, that is so little is known about. Yeah, that was a 13-year war by enslaved African people in Haiti. They fought against the French and the English, the two biggest naval forces at that point in time. And they overthrew both. And so they became their own independent nation January the 1st, 1804. The first abolition was 1807, the second one was 1833. So the truth is, what bearing did that revolution in Haiti have on abolition happening? Because it was showing now that they cannot be contained. We cannot keep doing this day on. So isn't it better to make it seem like you've given someone freedom than they fought and gained their own?
Yeah.
No, actually, we've seen. No, here you go. Let us allow you to be free, rather than you gain it yourself. So it's still that thing of disempowering. So we was looking at that, and then so this journey went from them, and it went. So that was like the revolutionaries. Then went to the activists, looking at people in the 1800s to the early 1900s who had fought and recorded and written and achieved and accomplished in this time when slavery was meant to have been abolished, yet still there was so few rights for people of African being could still treat them in such a demeaning manner. Then it comes up until the period in the mid-1900s, like the Windrush generation, looking at that. And then you're looking at action, which has come in, and the people like Race Relations Act in the UK got put in place. People started to get their civil rights movements around the world. And then it came up into the present day in Bristol, bringing it all the way up to now, of when people were now from African diaspora heritage were actually in positions of authority, and had been elected or put into positions of seemed power, shall we say. And it was this journey. And that was this whole journey to show, but it was really to humanize a story, a narrative, and let people know that they are that we all have value It was about value in life.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's cargo. And that was going to be an installation in 4 shipping containers. That's part of the thing with the name cargo. It's cargo containers. They were going to be connected, put on College Green outside the City Hall of Council House in Bristol as an interactive experience to walk through. And then what happened is COVID in 2020. So it happened in 2019, first we moved in 2020. COVID came in 2020 along with the Black Lives Matter movement, which came up again then. That was 2016, but then blew up again in 2020. And we then changed direction. We always looking to do education at the end of it, or to use it for education. But we felt that we needed like a Harry Potter moment to really like fascinate people or amaze people with the tech, to make them be interested in the story. And then with the Black Lives Matter other stuff, all of a sudden, and then with the thing about like, roads must fall, and then the statue being pulled down in Bristol, all this stuff, all of a sudden there was a lot of attention on people looking to want to look at these kind of narratives, which that appetite hadn't been there before when we were doing the work. And at the same time, we started to initiate the Cargo Classroom project, saying that what we're going to do is we're going to turn all these poems into lesson plans, education resources. Brilliant. But from the beginning, what we said we were going to do with this, and it was the same with the installation, even with that. So that was none of it's a great business model if you're looking to make money, because we never were going to charge for the exhibition, and we weren't going to charge for the education resources either. So we were making sure that these lessons were going to be free, and we didn't want to limit the scope, and that's what came from doing the installation. It's like, we do this installation, we can have it in Bristol. Then we were looking to tour it around different places in the country, possibly take it around the world if we could. But you're always limited to the amount of people you can connect with, if they can get to you. So it's how can we make this accessible to as many people as possible? Because that's what the problem is. It's accessibility. And it was like, well, it has to be it has to be online. So we've got to make this online. We've got to make it free. So that was always at the very beginning of what we were doing, and that's where we've got to. So we started creating the Cargo Classroom education resources, which was still developed now, is 15 lessons, which actually cover 5,000 years, because the very first one is on Imhotep, who is regarded as one of the first geniuses. He's an architect and intellect, responsible for building the first step pyramid in Kemet, which is now known as Egypt, and he performed surgery in so many things. But it's to show that's there to show that Africa was civilized, not the narrative that had been put out. Now a lot more information is starting to come out about Africa's contributions, but still here it was still very limited, and that's what we do. That's what we've been doing. So using poetry, illustrations, beautiful illustrations. And actually part of what it was to tell these stories in the way that we saw other people saw, especially like when you see stories of English greats. When you see these nostalgic stories, when you talk to school, it's always beautifully presented. And it's like we have to make sure that these stories, as rich as they are in information, they must be rich in content and colour visually. And it's hard for me to stay focused. I'm easily distracted. Chaz, who I work with, he'll say that. Loads of people advise, like, Lawrence, stop looking out the window. You're like a magpie. You're distracted by anything shiny. But what it was with what we developed, it was that we're developing it for people primarily that have got short attention spans. So it needs to be exciting. It needs to be able to keep drawing you in so that you don't want to look away. You want to stay engaged. So these were all the pieces that they were like the bullet points that were hammered down. It's got to be beautiful. It's got to be free. It's got to be accessible. It has to be of quality. And we want to be trying to bring as many stories to light that haven't been, rather than duplicating stuff that was already being done. And I think that was the challenge. And we've always been up for a challenge, so that's what made it also exciting. And also people telling us it couldn't be done. That was quite interesting. That was fun, because all the lessons are built off we introduce you to either a culture or a moment in history, but through an individual. So we're bringing individual stories to light, but then that's the gateway, that's the door. So the individual is from somewhere in Africa or somewhere in the Caribbean or somewhere anywhere in the world. You can then talk about that place in the world at the same time, bring that forward. That's what we'll be doing. That's Cargo Classroom, which is being used. It is being used globally now. And then what's funny is later on we've done a course with working with the School of Education at Bristol University, and we've done a course for them for Future Learn, which is a course to teach teachers to teach our resources, because part of one of the barriers that they face is that teachers are people that have gone through the education system and a full education. They haven't been taught about a lot of these stories, or a lot of who these individuals put on these contributions, because they've been taught a very Eurocentric, biased education. And one of the people who worked with really closely over the last few years, David Rawlins, who's the teacher, he now works for the School of Education at the University of Bristol as well, he loves history. You know, he went to school, had a good education. He went to QEH, which is a school that I should have gone to, which I didn't go to. And then he went to uni, did a degree in history, everything. And when we met, we started working together, and he was introduced to Imatep. He couldn't believe he didn't know about Imatep. Wow. He was like, Lawrence, I've done everything, what you would say is took the correct path to be educated, to be as informed about history and be a history teacher and in education, you know. And that there's this individual that Imatep's one of my favourite. Imatep is definitely David Rawlins' favourite person of African heritage, of Africa in history. But it was the fact that he didn't know about him, that he wanted to know so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was like, and the thing is, he just felt he'd been robbed. He's like, I've been robbed. I've been lied to. Why did I not know about this individual? And it was that. So we work really closely now, working through doing the education resources thing. So, but this was the thing. So we did workshops with teachers to find out from them, what's your barriers? What? So one thing we've got, we're learning along the way as well. Like, we've never sat here to say, we got all the answers. Look, this is what it is. It's like the whole thing is back, but it's about learning together. It's about us all being on this journey and learning and having and allowing all people from all walks of life, wherever you're from, to contribute to what we're doing.
Brilliant.
And I believe that is so important, to have a community of difference working together for a common good.
That's lovely.
You know, and I think sometimes that doesn't happen. You know, you're not an academic. Oh, if you haven't got this academic skill, you can't be in this room. You know, this is just for the academics, and this is just for the people that got lived experience, or this is just for people here. And then you get people that separate themselves. Like, actually, this is just but it's just, this group here is just for black people, or just for people of this heritage. This group here is just for white, or this is just for here. And it's like, actually, that's why the whole framing of this is humanity. Yeah, it's all of us. And that's why colorism, to remove colorism from the conversation, is so important. But that doesn't mean that we are denying racism. Where some people can get upset, like, oh, what you try to say, you don't see colour. I'm not blind. Of course we see all the difference. But there's differences in how it's been set up to have people fight against each other. That isn't real. That isn't right. So, of course, we see all. But remember, we're part of the human family. We're not these different races with different brains or different attributes, or what had been made up lies before. So this is humanity's story. So let's do that. So that's why we work with anybody that can contribute, anybody that has value, and we're not saying we're not turning anybody away. So as a collective, Yeah, so and I think that's interesting. Some people, even when they've come to go a bit like, well, you know, Lawrence, it must just be for black people, just want to African people. You don't know where you don't know what anybody can contribute, and if you're then
Mm.
denying groups of people what they look like or their belief is, or for whatever reason you feel, don't you know that a nugget of wisdom could be there, and then you're just
Mm.
limiting your resource base. You just don't know where
Mm.
it could be. And it's funny. So this, and I got some of this thinking from when I had a meeting um, with like an imam and somebody to do with the mosque on my road. So this is a little bit of a digression, but it's how you get to that self-learning for yourself going through things. So
Mm.
I'm not religious. I believe in energy. I believe in people, but I'm not. But I'm not. I don't feel my thing that gets me around religion, or the way that it's presented. I'm still learning as I grow. But I don't feel that it's right that there's only certain individuals that would only have the word or the ear of this God, that you only talk to certain people and you've got to go to a special place, and then these people are made special, and there's a hierarchy. Everything that's got hierarchy,
Mm.
I'm very uncomfortable with. Yeah, I mean,
Mm.
also just you're special, and then you're just that little bit more special, and then you're just the really
Mm.
special one, and it's that it falls back in that line of servitude to a certain degree. So for me, what it was, one of my neighbours, when I told him that, I think he wanted to make me his mission a little bit. And he's like, "Oh Lord, you need to come and talk to our imam, and we're going to talk to you about Islam, this, that, and the other, and you're going to do this." So I came and we sat and we had a meeting one day and a meal at his house. They were really lovely people, and I like to debate, so we had a really good conversation. So we went all around the things to get to the crux of it. What it was, he's saying about what they said to get their children to eat a full meal. And he said, what it is, when they're eating their food, we tell them that in the rice on the plate is their blessing. But what
Oh.
you don't know which grain of rice that blessing is in.
Oh.
So you have to eat all the grain. So you have to eat all your. So you got to eat all the rice. When you eat all the rice, you know that you would have secured that blessing. And in a sense, that's like humanity. You don't know where that.
That's lovely. That's so beautiful.
You don't know where that could be. That
Yeah.
individual, who it is, what they look like. It could be anybody could just say something to you, or could give you something that it could be like a key to just unlock something that you didn't even know you had. And it was when he was telling me that about the food, while still doing this work, I was
Brilliant.
like, actually, if we look at that to the world, that could be anybody could have that nugget
That's so
that
beautiful, isn't it?
opens you.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
before then, I was a bit closed off of where I would go to look for
Yeah.
information. And it was
Yeah.
after that, I was like, oh my God, look how you've been limiting your opportunity to learn. It could be anybody,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely anybody. So
Mm.
it, let it be anybody. Talk to everybody.
Yeah.
Don't deny anyone.
Yeah.
And so that was part of my own growth. Was when that touched, and it was like no, and and I found it to be invaluable. I find
Brilliant.
it's like yeah, like so. I'm so glad that we had that conversation. I ended up there with the meal, the flat, and be there to relate that then, not just off their blessing, but their prayers, but then actually look to the world and just think, well, actually, that blessing of knowledge or anything could be anybody. So never deny
Mm.
anybody the opportunity, and never engage with, never not engage. And even now, I should be invited places this, and a lot of times I think, oh, but if I'm invited to a space that I might feel really uncomfortable about, all the people there, I think, oh, wow, wow. I think, well, what you can do, you can go in, and if you don't like what's there, you can just leave, can't you? But don't
Yeah.
just brush it away. Just, oh no, no, I don't like you, or oh, you're bigots, or oh, there's nothing there for me. No, no, I'm not interested. It's like, no, take a look.
Yeah.
And if you don't like what you see or hear, then just walk away. But you never
Yeah.
know, you might hear that one thing, or you might hear, or you might hear a lot of stuff. But yeah, and that's why, as a human family, it's so important that we engage with all.
Yeah.
And that's where we've got through. So that's the journey, more going running all the way through here, and then At the same time, it's getting access to children. No, important. It's so much easier, I believe, to give children the tools,
Yeah.
the correct tools, than trying to fix broken or bigoted adults. So you could end up in a
Yeah.
conversation with
Yeah.
so fixed in their mindset anyway that all you're going to
Mm.
do is just burn loads of energy trying to convince or change people's ways of thought or what they believe.
Mm.
That's never going to change. And you could be in these
Yeah.
spaces having these debates, having these discussions, conversations. Like, I could go in those spaces for the rest of my life. I feel like, well, I'm trying to change it, but you're trying to try my back. Like, but 30 years later, when we get old and then you pass, all you've done is argued or debated with people around a problem
Yeah.
and not really created any solutions. So that's where the
Yeah.
education of children come in. So our next part of this journey, and even with our secondary school resources, our key stage 3 resources we've created, if you don't know this information, you can take it all the way down, and it can be to any age group. And because the poetry connects with children, I know my poems are used in primary schools anyway. The beautiful
Mm.
illustrations we've created, they're easy to be used in primary school.
Mm.
So these
Brilliant.
ones we've already created, you can pick pieces out of it and use it for any age group. But what we're doing going forward is our next set of resources, which we're going to embark on, is for primary school children, all of them. Because we just feel that if we can open up the mind to show the possibilities of humanity and what people have contributed as early as possible, you're not trying to correct children to make them suddenly think that there's value in people if they know that they've had value from the beginning. So
Yeah.
the educational resources we're working on next is a series called, so you get this is a bit of a first, not hardly anybody knows this yet, but it's a series called Ancient Civilizations. So we're going to put together a course of a body of work looking at all old civilizations and do them for key stage 1, lower 2 and upper 2 for primary schools. So that children there can go and look at contributions from people from all over the world.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
And
I love that.
see the value in all of humanity.
Yeah, yeah.
So they grew up, they're like, well, actually, this world I live in, everybody's contributed to. Look what they've done. Look at that. And that's exciting.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So that's the project. That's what we're actually currently started now. And we've just done.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. And I suppose you probably missed some bits as well, loads of other stuff going on. But in general, that's kind of trying to put together a chronological journey of 1969 to 2023.
So Lars, when times get tough and through that journey, I can imagine it must have got unbelievably tough. You know, going into care, your mum, your dad, your brother. What keeps you going? What is that inner fire, that inner fuel that you've got? Because there is one, or there is a lot of one.
I think when I think about it, I think when I was younger, I think just being, it's weird, it's what keeps me going. I think I'm a fighter by nature. Yeah. And I've got a bit of a pushback. I don't know what it is. I'm trying to think, what is the actual fire that drives me?
Yeah,
I think the fire that drives me is I got something that wants to just prove people wrong.
Okay.
Upset the stereotype at times.
Yeah.
I suppose in the good way. I suppose at some point when I was younger, I just had a thing where I would just not want to be part of it. So that's how it was in the beginning. It was like, I don't want to be part of this mainstream society. I think always being part of I think part of what helps me is that for a lot of the time growing up, I was outside of mainstream society.
Yeah.
And I never really had too much of a fear of being alone, because I had been alone for so much of my childhood.
Yeah.
and to go off and do something. I think that became a strength, but believing in something at the same time. So I think as coming along, it's like, oh, you can't do that, or that won't work, or this won't. Now people not agreeing with you, but you're feeling that this is right, and it's that. It's like, oh, maybe they get it right down the line, but it doesn't. But I'm going to do this. I'm going to go along this bit. And even I came back from hustling and living the life I grew as a younger child, growing up, I grew when I first came out filming. And a lot of people go, Lawrence, what are you filming? Like, you're filming the crackheads, or you're in the crack houses filming, and you're around the prostitute, you're filming all this, but it's us. We will be part of this world. What is it? I said, what we are and what we've done is destroying us. And and we're doing it now to ourselves. And it's not right. So I'd actually had people, a friend, a really good friend, I was really shocked when it happened, but he actually came to my house, knocked on my door. I grew an afro at the time as well. But he come to my door and he asked me if I'd gone mad. He was, Lawrence, he pretended saying you're mad. You're out on the streets. Because prostitutes and street hustlers, they raised me as much as anybody else. I'd sit on the corners with the prostitutes from 7, 8 years old, 9 years old. Because the thing is, they were always good to me.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. I've always found the streets, I'd always found the streets comfortable. And they never judged me.
Yeah.
So the fires come from, even from a young age, knowing that people are just people. And circumstance creates the reality that you're in, but it doesn't mean that you're bad.
Yeah.
Like everything that's deemed bad isn't evil. And I think that's the thing of, I think that's the, even young, and I think being misrepresented, being judged for being something which you kind of inertly inside know you're not.
Yeah.
And then it's like, no, I'll prove to you otherwise. Like I think that was part of it, always being judged. So I suppose growing up, oh, you're bad, but I'm not bad. Like all this stuff going around me. And then in the end, it's like, I always had a terrible default sometimes. And I sort of go, all right, if you're telling me I'm bad, I'm bad. I will be the best bad you could imagine.
I love that.
And I did that a few times. And later on, I realized that when I fell into that, when I just got, so pissed off, that was the worst type of self-harm ever. Because I was, the only person I was hurting was me. But every time it wasn't like I always had strength. I gave up many times. But every time I gave up, I went, oh. And so I'd be like, fuck this. And you. That route, even though there's excitement and everything on it, there is quite, the majority of the time, there's a few paths. You kind of know they end up. It's prison, mental institution, drug addiction, or death. And I ran those paths many times. And somehow I came out the other end. You know? And so I think it's learning. So at times growing up, the fire was there in a sense, but in a mischievous way. Even as a child, I was feral. I'd run. I would be at home. I'd be a runaway. I used to climb out my bedroom window from the age of 6 years old, 7 years old, walk the streets all night. But it's just that wandering. I think there's that thing. I never had a fear of outside. You know, my home life was much more damaging. It felt felt like there's more violence there than there was out on the streets. And that's the thing. So I don't know. I think that fire for the work I do came late. I think what I've always had, I just think I always had energy.
Yes.
I always had, yeah, I always had a lot of energy. I can remember times when I gave up. I went to go in the army when I was 17. And that's a funny story. I'm sorry. That's something else. My father, oh, you're always in trouble. You can't do nothing right. You're just in trouble. You know, the army would sort you out, but you couldn't do the army. You couldn't do the army. You couldn't do the army. But that's what you should get sorted out. I can remember one day and I was like, what? You don't think I could go in the army? Watch. I marched down to the army, signed up, place in the centre of Bristol. I would sign up to join the army because my older brother had been in the army. And I went to sign up. So I signed up. I went in, did you just had a simple aptitude test, a load of questions, and they got given these cards for different jobs you would go through. I was very honest with them about my background and everything. So I got all these cards that for all the jobs I could apply for, and loads of the jobs were blacked out. They said, well, because of your criminal past and because of this and that, you can't be that. You can't be a military policeman. You can't go for this. And you can't go for that. So here's your remit of jobs you're going for. I think I was going to go for the RTC, Royal Transport Corps. All the other Royal Transport. Like, if I could get in the army, learn to drive, I always liked to drive. So here's a funny story again. So I went there, went to sign to get in. I had an interview. They said, Lawrence, what you need to do is you need to keep out of trouble for 6 months. Come back to us in 6 months' time. If you're not being in trouble, you can go through the process. I come back 6 months later, not being in trouble. Well, no, we're still not sure we can take you on. Come back in 12 months' time without being in trouble. Right. I'm still up to mischief. I hadn't been caught for being in trouble. Over the next 18 months now. Go back in after 18 months of the whole journey. Okay. You could go towards, I was going to go to Sutton Coldfield to go and do a 2-3 day, I suppose, assessment to end the army. So I got to go to Sutton Coldfield, went up there, did all the tests, did all the physical thing, excelled in all of this. People started to get their enrolment dates being given. You went and met an officer, had a meeting, and he said, right, Sid, you'll be joining in 6 weeks' time. February so you'll be off to where you're going. I watched all the people go down. Yeah, that's you. You know you're in. You've done this. Great. I'll teach them all that. They've been telling me I can't do this. And then I went there. Went and sat down in the office. I remember sitting there, and he said, "Oh, Lawrence, we're really sorry, but really they shouldn't have let you come here yet. You know, because of your past and everything. We're not able to sign you up. But if you come back in 6 months' time." Look at that. I'm not going to lie. The pain I felt of being denied again for doing everything that I was told to do, and then doing that and succeeding.
Yeah.
So it took me back to the school thing when I was 11 plus. It was the same again, and it just hurt. I remember I came from there and I was like, got into a load of trouble again. I'd rebel, that was the problem. So I needed to find something to do with that energy and that spirit, because I would just, in a sense, kind of self-destruct. But it'd be ignited, it'd be like, oh my God, I need to go and do something. And it was later. The thing is, I tell my children, and even I collected my doctorate the other day, and I told them there, you know, my children saved my life. My children gave me a purpose. Even though when they were first born, it was like terrified me. But they ended up making me find a way to control this energy and to put it to use, to good use, to do something constructive with it, and not just want to. Always used to keep bouncing back to just want to use that fire in my soul to burn everything down. And even my partner, even Chaz, would say to me sometimes, he was like, you'll just burn it all. But the thing is, you'd burn it all and sit there and then watch. You know? So Chaz is a with us, our working relationship, it's been really good, because Chaz has come from a very privileged background. Even though we look the same with the same makeup, he's dual heritage. But he had his parents really successful, hard-working parents, grandparents as well. And when I first met Chaz, I didn't think people that looked like it sounds really ignorant, really. It's like thing. But when I saw him, what he'd done and what he did with his life and what he was doing, I was amazed. I was like, wow, we can then. Somebody that looks like me. He's similar, everything similar to me, he looks like and everything. And it's like, but look what you've done, look what you've achieved. You can. It is possible. And then so I remember from meeting him, I really wanted my children to know him. I was like, look, children, it's a good example. It looks just like your dad. But look what they've done. They're professional and you can work, you can go to school, you can get through that route. Where they knew of my route at the same time, which is just like completely different. So we have a really good balance working together, which is that. But yeah, in the beginning, I don't think the passion, the spark, to be honest, it all comes from pain.
Yeah.
My fire comes from not being believed and from being abandoned and things like that. It's kind of that. So for a lot of time, it was really unhealthy because I would be like, by my life, it would be just like, well, F you all. I'm going like this. So, yeah, I think it ultimately sort of says, where's your fire come from? What is that got it all burning? What fans the flames in your soul? It's injustice and pain. That's where it all came from.
Yeah. Wow. And if you could use one word to describe yourself, what would it be?
I suppose the one word I use all the time, because I was told it, but I think it kind of thing. It's mischief.
Mischief.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's mischief.
Love it.
Yeah. I don't really like the system. I don't like the way certain things are in place. But it's how can you play with it to make it better?
Yeah.
Instead of just completely rejecting it all the time, which I went through for a lot.
Which is that kind of, which is so much of your past, isn't it? It was a destructive force, but then what you've done is gone through that transition and learnt from all of those things and then created a constructive element to that fire or that fuel, haven't you?
Yeah.
It's like, when you're at school and you wanted to get excluded, so you did everything that you could, but they said, no, they're not going to exclude you. And now you've just learned, and now everything you do with cargo and everything else is constructive and not destructive. And I loved that shift.
It's when I learned that what I was doing, it's when I looked at something. I can remember when I was in sixth form secondary school, the teachers there, I had a really good, I was doing physical education and business studies. And I remember his name was Mr. Perlieski. I really got on with him. He's my PE teacher, physical education teacher. But he used to tell me that the teachers were in the staff room plotting to get rid of me from this school. Because I'd had a fight with a teacher before I started the school because he assaulted me and I fought it back. But I remember eventually I left the school, and I always felt that I let them win later on when I seen how much no education was a stumbling block in trying to get on in life as a young man, trying to get into work and doing things when all of a sudden I just didn't ever want to fill out a CV or anything like that. When you go for a job, or put anything down because there's that big piece that says qualifications. And there I am looking at it, and I've got nothing to put in there. And you just think, well, you're a failure, aren't you? They're going to look at you as a failure. You've got nothing to go in there. And I remember at that time, just Ashton Park, that sixth form school, when I was there, that's where I could have caught up on all the qualifications I didn't get before. I'd got my business studies, got my physical education qualification. I'd had something to put on there. And I can remember what a barrier that was for me personally to get over to apply for jobs. And it was, but I remember later on thinking, oh God, like, really, you did that to yourself. You let them, you got emotional. Yeah. When you get emotional, you burn everything. And you've got that thing, no, I'm not going to have it anywhere. So it's trying to see self-harm. And I think that happened with my interaction with the police and authorities later on. If they troubled me, they did that. I used to have adverse reactions to them, be really mouthy, really loud, touch me up, touch you back, and then I'd lose control. And then it was like, actually, every time you lose control, Lawrence, they have all the mechanisms to control you.
Yeah.
And
you're giving it to them.
You're giving them all your power. You're giving you all the power. You become absolutely powerless. You have nothing. But you keep doing this.
And in a way, you become enslaved by that, don't you?
Yeah. And it's funny you saying that, because one of the things, I remember, I said this. But I said, police have come near me, they go to touch me. I said, don't touch me. I said, you can't touch me. I said, don't touch me. And I say, I'm not in chains now. My hands aren't shackled now. Try and touch me and see what I do. You think I can't touch you back? Oh, well, are you threatening a police officer? Is that actually a threat? Well, actually, I call it ever. Well, here we go. Come on, let's take him in. And it's like, right. So here's another part of the learning experience. I'd be running around, come back from London, hustling, naughty. And I'd come back to my friends. I think at the time I was only young, but driving, I'd have loads of money in my pocket. And I've ended up coming back into Bristol, coming to St Paul's, and there's a little roundabout. It's like Portland Square, you come off the bottom of the M32, the motorway, and there's a little beautiful Georgian square, but it's like a roundabout, but a square. And then my friend's just the other side, and I'm about to get to his house. But as I've come onto the square, I haven't stopped, and the police are always on the square because prostitutes on the square. Oh, we've run out.
Wow.
Hang on, I've lost you for some reason.
Oh,
what just happened? Something. Hang on, let me just go.
Can you hear me?
No, that's what was weird. I thought the Zoom just finished. No, we're back.
No,
some reason then something on my screen just jumped across. So what happened is I've jumped the square. It was Portland Square. It's funny. I was going to my friend Ronnie Sizer's house. I learned a lot through being with them because they became successful artists and DJs. But anyway, I've jumped the square. As I've jumped onto the square to get to Ronnie's, I've seen a riot van right next to me. I'm like, oh, shit. I know they're going to pull me over now because I didn't stop. And anyway, I pulled up outside Ronnie's, outside his flat on Wilder Street back in the day. And then the next time I've seen the riot van has pulled up straight behind me in the car. And I think, oh, God, you're in trouble now. This is all I need. I just got off the motorway from London. And when the policeman's come bouncing up to the car, and I'm in my little hot hatch, he bounced up to the car. I've undone the window, and I've just gone, and I've never done this in my life. It was really weird. And he said, right, what are you doing? And I've just gone, I'm sorry, officer. And I remember, he just, there was a moment where he just shuddered and stopped. And he just went, and I'd never seen a policeman look at me like that before. His whole demeanour, everything had just changed a bit. It wasn't angry, oh, here we go. We're going to grab. He said, what? Oh, yeah. I said, I'm sorry. I said, I've just come from London. I've just come into my friends. I said, I know I should have stopped there. I didn't stop, and I'm sorry. And he's like, oh, okay. And it completely disarmed him.
Yeah.
For the first time. For me, it's the first time that had ever happened. Normally, I'd be like this. What are you stopping me for? You stopped me because I'm black. Why are you doing this? And straight away it's that confrontation, and that they can end up controlling. But this didn't happen. And he went, oh, what's your name? I gave him my name. It's your car? I said, yeah, this is my car. He goes, okay. I get out of the car. Buzz, Ronnie lets me in. Like I said, I had money in my pocket, which would be hard to account for. And I got in the thing, I go, oh God, I got pulled over by police outside, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, I seen the van. I said, yeah, it's this. So I just took the stuff out of my pocket, put it all down on the table, just sat down. And then, literally 2 minutes later, bzzz, the buzzer's gone for the flat. And it's the police, and they've said, oh, is Lawrence there, please? Oh, yeah, he's there. Could you ask him to come downstairs? Right. Anyway, I'm like, okay, anyway, I've got nothing on me. I think I'd have had a drawer of weed on me because I smoked. I was like, that's all, that's in my pocket now, it's all now. Pop downstairs. And they're like, hi Lawrence, what it is, there's a warrant out for your arrest for something. It was something frivolous. It was the stupidest little thing. But if I'd have had the normal interaction that I've had before, I'd have had a little bag of weed in my pocket. I'd have had some money in my pocket that could really be accounted for in a way that would have passed. It would have all been a headache. And I'd have got done for back then. Weed was still a problem. It's a lot less now. But this is what, like 1994. I'd have got done for having some weed on me. So I've come down. I've got nothing on my thing, and I just yeah, you've got to get to the police station now. We just get this done. And I always remember this in the thing because I got in the back of the riot, and I'm sat in the back of the riot van like this. Biggest smile on my face, just like, and the police. I always remember the police would go to, "You're really happy, aren't you? Seeing you've just been arrested." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, I had nothing important to do right now. We're just getting out of the way. It's not for anything major, is it? It's just a little thing. Let's just go and get this signed off." And all I'm playing through in my head is I'd have got to the custody sergeant at the police station, gone through the same old rigmarole of like, right, could you empty your pockets? Now, my interaction was different. I'd have turned up there in my pocket, I'd have put some money on the counter, put a bit of weed on the counter, and it'd be like, oh, right, there you go, we're charging you for this. What are you doing with that? And just all this other stuff, and and it was that moment when the first realization was, oh, look at that, you just spoke to them. You didn't react in your normal manner. And you've had a much better experience.
Yeah.
And then later on, that's what I learned. So even when I was out doing the Inner City Tales project, I'd film the police and filming all the stuff in the community. And they'd come at me quite aggressively looking for an aggressive response. And I'd always be very calm and just talk. And I found that it was like you're holding your power. And that's what I've learned more and more. Yeah.
Brilliant. I love that. Loz, amazing. Seriously, mate, it's like there's just so much. I mean, there is so much to you. I mean, in terms of just your depth of knowledge. I mean, I read your life cycles poem, and that's again so powerful about that journey that we take, and is there a return journey? And I love your whole quest for knowledge and acceptance and just getting on with it. It's truly beautiful. I mean, it really is.
I think drive. I think if you say what is my drive, when I was younger, it's all over the place. But what became, so I suppose, what is my fire? That's what I mean. I'm still on this fear. So the main thing is this: I didn't want my children to be me.
Oh wow!
That was and that is exactly. And it's not like I haven't said it before. It says why I should say it's like people, Lawrence, why do you like? So later on, not in my childhood because I didn't have them, but later on, why do you do what you do? I do what I do because I don't want my children to be who I was. But then I said I don't want my children to be me because the life I've lived, I've come out of it. I've lost a lot of friends along the way. Been involved in real chaos. But because it was my normality, it didn't seem like chaos, but it actually is. But what I did, so what is my fire? My fire, what drives me to do everything I did, was so that my children wouldn't be me, and that then I could become somebody that they could respect and want to be. I didn't want them to be looking at others to be led. Like I looked everywhere for family. External to my family.
Wow.
So we got to the answer in the end. With the work that I do and where I am, that is what it was. I just didn't want my children to be me. Because I just didn't think they'd have to, I just didn't think they'd make it.
Yeah.
And that was it.
And as you say, life cycles from no given journey, are we guaranteed to return? And I guess in some ways, because the landscape's so different now, isn't it, for kids, is that return journey is sometimes a lot shorter for them than it was for us.
If I had to, if I lived, well, it wouldn't happen. The life I lived could not be
Yeah.
lived now.
No.
It couldn't be lived.
No, yeah. No.
I was on the run from the police when I was younger,
Yeah.
and but even in the institution, I can remember being, oh, that's madness. But I know now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But back then,
Yeah.
when I was in the
Yeah.
madness, there wasn't camera phones, there wasn't cameras, there wasn't helicopters, there wasn't CCTV.
Yeah.
So it was a lot easier to disappear.
Yeah.
Not now. And even when I used to talk to young people now, it's that the thing is, people had it's in a weird sense, had the luxury. It's stupid, really, when you say it, but kind of had the luxury to learn how to be bad because you didn't get caught just like that. Where now you can just get
Yeah.
caught straight instantly. You can't go out and practice driving a car when you haven't
Yeah.
got a license because
Yeah.
you've got PNC cameras and you've got and you've got this and that, and also illegally driven. That car's got no tax. That car's got no insurance. That can all be done off a camera now. Back when when I was young, growing up, you could have a photocopied insurance document that someone had doctored, and you could get stopped by the police, and you could show them a document that, no, there's my insurance. You could turn up at the police, and now it's all online, it's all digital. They could just go, da 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 da. No, you've got no insurance, you've got no this. It was so different. The world was so different. So, yeah. So, and the consequences, it's just a different world. It's just a different world. But I just didn't want my children to live the life I've lived. That's what it was. And that was my drive from there. But I was terrified for them. And it's like, what can you do to? But and also, you've got to be better than what you are, because that was certain people.
That's lovely.
And that's just what. Yes, I say, yeah. My children made me the man I am today, as well as saving my life. And funny thing, I tell them that. I tell them that plenty. They hear stories about their dad. People come up and say, "Well, your dad used to be," or people go to, "Well, you're okay. You got your dad. No one's going to trouble you." Like no one's going to, like all these different aspects, and even lots of people I had around me growing up that were my people, my peer group and friends. Later on, I had to just distance myself from many in certain situations. If there wasn't something I could tell my children directly at that point, constructive about what they were doing in the world that we're in. Like I said, I grew up around, I grew up all around hustlers. My father was originally the people I grew up with. It's just how it was then. And then later on, it was looking at it all like, well, I don't want you out there hustling, and I don't want you involved in crime, and I don't want you thinking that you've got to attack anything that attacks you. I want to remove you from that. I don't want that to be you. And you've got me. You've got your mum, having people around you, and even my 18, like my youngest one who's 15 and a half, still kisses me. My 18-year-old who's nearly 19, he still has to kiss and give me a hug every time he meets me.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, he's like, come here. I'll give you a big hug. Maybe he can't get out my arms, and I give him a kiss. But but to me, it's so important, that thing of love, to show the children that they're loved, and they matter. Because I think for so long growing up, I just felt that I didn't matter.
Yeah,
and if you don't care for me, why should I care for me? And I had that weird energy around it. It wasn't like I'd sit in the corner pining and crying about it. I was a bit like, well, it's me against the world then. Let's go.
Brilliant. Amazing. Thank you. Seriously. I could talk to you for the rest of the week. Honestly, it's so lovely, Loz. Just your insights and your I love that there's a huge calmness around the chaos that you've been a part of. I love that just the tranquility that you've got now. And it's not that it hasn't got edge, because I know that it has. And there's a real passion to want to educate, to help people to learn and to evolve. But I just love the chaos that you've still in touch with, because it still keeps fueling you. I love that.
Yeah, I think some it's like I'm still around the people I've always been around. That's the other bit. It's like
Yeah.
uh, uh, I can't. It's like part of it. I moved, in a sense, I suppose I moved through. I kind of moved through two worlds. But
Mm.
my heart is still
Mm.
always around the community and the culture I've
Yeah.
grown from.
Yeah.
But the world that I now, a lot of the spaces I am now in, and some people,
Yeah.
when I hear like sometimes, I suppose about employment issues with people in there, like, oh, I can't say this, or I feel,
Yeah.
I said, like, nobody's got a gun here in your office. Nobody's going to like do that. So I think the
Mm.
environment that I've come from, that I always still will, I'm always still around. Like, and even now, I still go down and sit on the corner with the hustlers. I still go and sit in a place
Yeah.
and have a couple. Like, I don't think I stopped smoking 18 months ago. I don't
Yeah.
smoke anymore. I still see some of my old friends and still go around certain places. But I've lived like this is the madness. It's like later on, everyone still tell you how dangerous it was, how you lived in this, and you know what it is there. But because it's your normality, it was just normal.
Yeah.
The
It's what you know.
violence in my life has always just been normal. It wasn't. It was like, oh, that happened again today. What's going on? It's like being in like I suppose the mainstream work environment, this, that, and the other. There is no threat anywhere.
Yeah.
Your awareness. So that's where the calmness. I think it's just like, what's the worst thing that can happen? If someone could say something. It's like I grew up around spaces where you could look at somebody wrong, they want to kill you, and you have to deal with
Yeah.
that.
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to be able to
Yeah.
defend
Yeah.
against. The thing is, if you can't defend against that, if you can't react to that, you're a victim,
Mm. Mm.
and you have to grow with that. I suppose they call it resilience, but with that
Mm.
awareness and with all those different
Mm.
attributes. So when I see people getting or hear people being bullied within a work environment, or not being listened to, or not being figured, I say, just go and say something. Why are you not
Yeah.
telling somebody, don't talk to me like that? It's like you've
Yeah.
got all these laws and employment laws and stuff within this space that
Mm.
protecting you. When we came from London, laws were being upheld. There was no protection but you.
Mm.
If you couldn't protect
Mm.
yourself, you couldn't stand for yourself, it was there. And at the same time, you've got a system trying to beat you down as well. So
Mm.
being 54 in a minute as well, I think my age really does help with the calmness I've got and the life I've lived.
Mm. Mm.
And the work that I now do. So
Oh, it's beautiful.
I feel that I've contributed. I feel that the work I do has value.
It's huge.
But all of that, I
Huge
think,
value.
all of that has helped over this journey to make me a calmer person.
Mm. Mm.
I used to be triggered like the wind,
Yeah.
lit like that, triggered, react
Yeah.
instantly. I
Yeah. Yeah.
got over something over vigilant or something. Mad space of awareness from being very young in threatening or dangerous environments all the time. So my awareness is like a deer. You walk into a
Mm.
space and like your external energy fills the whole room. Something moves over there.
Mm.
What's that? What's that? What's that? But that becomes your normal nature. So
Mm.
so you get to see a lot of things before it becomes a thing.
Brilliant.
And when you learn to hone that, yeah. And at the same time, with all
Hugely
of it,
powerful.
you've got to have a bit of fun. You've got to have some fun. It's
Definitely.
life is this journey isn't long. Not as long as I think we think we're going to live.
No.
And
No. No.
and it's dealing with what you can. It's address what you can. Try not to get too distracted into too many spaces. And
Yeah.
and you can't do it all. think that's something to
Yeah.
realise. There's a realisation for yourself, for myself. You could be dragged into 20 directions trying to do this, that, and the other, and end up not even being a jack in any of those trades. Just end up just stumbling
Yeah.
along.
Yeah.
Or think, actually, I think I can do something here. So let me just hold here. And this, I've always kept getting pulled back to education over and over and over again. And in the end, this, I can educate through my poetry as well as having Cargo as a direct education platform. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you.
And I appreciate, this is the first, you're my first appointment of the year as well. I thought I'd let you know that.
Is it? Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I mean, I grew up in the West Country, so I'll be down soon. And if we can, I'd love to meet you in person and, share a walk and a coffee or whatever, because I find you're amazing. I love your energy. I love it. As I say, I love the fact that it's come from that chaos, but it's been channeled in such a brilliant way. I love that.
Yeah. I think someone asked me before if you change anything, or if it could have been this, it could have been that. It's like one of the things I've lived by, and I think even though at times you kind of felt, I think you might be going mad at this, that, and the other, or just the stress or the pressures of life and all what's going on around you can be like overbearing. But you don't know you will never know what could have been. You can't. You can't know. And to believe that what could have been would be better than what you've had, that in itself is a mental illness.
Well, that's a madness.
What it will do, it's not a mental illness. It will give you a mental illness. That's what I mean.
Yeah, definitely.
That will. So people say, "Oh, but Lawrence, imagine if you would have got into that school, or imagine if this would have happened, or imagine if that." I said, "Yeah, but imagine if on my first day of school, I went to run across the road and got run over by a lorry."
Yeah.
Or imagine you went to school and this occurred to you at school, or that, or imagine you didn't do that on that day and you went and met that person, or you. So I think the problem that often people have is that they want to believe that what could have been would have been better. So something that's helped me to keep myself together is that all I know is what is and what has been.
Brilliant.
And accepting that it just is. This is it. So would you have changed anything? Well, I can't.
No. Yeah. And don't go down that lunacy route.
Yeah, don't go down that rabbit hole.
It is.
Because that will possibly destroy you. All you know is what has been and what is. And just know that everything in the past is in the past. And going forward, you have the opportunity and you have the ability to make your own choices.
Brilliant. Beautiful.